pier smelled like diesel and salt and cold coffee. Mine had gone cold in my hand somewhere around the second cleat. I did not mind. I had walked longer piers than that one, in worse weather, carrying worse news. It was 5 minutes past 6 in the morning. The light was still gray. The gulls were up, but not loud yet. The water between the pier and the hull was flat and black and did not move. Up ahead, past the shore, power cables thick as fire hoses, and the mooring lines as thick as my arm, the ship sat against the camels with her bow toward the channel. 200 and some feet of gray steel. Her hull number was painted white and tall near the bow. I had been looking at that number for 3 weeks in message traffic and in the change of command program and in my own handwriting on a legal pad at 2 in the morning. It was the first time I had stood under it. A ship at the pier is a quiet thing at that hour. Not asleep. Ships do not sleep. There's always a watch, always a low hum from somewhere below the waterline, always a thin ribbon of steam or exhaust going up somewhere aft. But quiet, waiting for the day to be poured into it. I stood there a moment and let it be quiet with me. I had a canvas bag on my shoulder and a windbreaker zipped to the chin. No cover, no rank, nothing on me said anything about who I was. That was on purpose. I had wanted to see the ship the way a stranger sees it, before the ceremony, before the side boys and the folded programs and the folding chairs on the pier, before it became mine. You do not get many chances to see a thing plainly before it belongs to you. After it is yours, you can never see it plainly again. So I had come down early in a windbreaker to look. A young Marine stood at the head of the brow. He was maybe 21. Base security, augmenting the waterfront for the ceremony the next day. Fresh camis, clean boots, a rifle slung the way they teach you, and a posture that had not yet learned the difference between authority and a bad mood. He watched me come the whole length of that last stretch, and by the time I reached the foot of the brow, he had already decided what I was. "Turn around," he said. "No credentials, no brow." I stopped. I set the coffee on a bollard. I took my identification out of my jacket pocket and held it up, flat, at his eye level. He glanced at it for less than a second. He did not read it. He had already read me, and the card was not going to change his mind. That is the thing about being decided about. The evidence stops mattering. You become a shape the other person already knows the name of. "Ma'am, this is a Navy warship," he said. "You can't be down here. Family Day was last month." Behind him, up on the quarterdeck, 2 sailors had turned to watch. A young officer, a lieutenant junior grade in service khakis, stood the officer of the deck watch at the top of the brow. Next to her, a petty officer held the watch log. On the fantail, 4 or 5 sailors in coveralls had stopped what they were doing. One of them had a phone out and was holding it low against his leg the way they do when they think nobody can see. "Son," I said, "I have business aboard. Look at the card." I looked at it. He stepped down off the brow toward me. "You need to leave the pier. I'm not going to tell you again." I have stood on colder decks than that boy's stare. I did not raise my voice. I did not reach for anything. I let my hands stay where he could see them, and I kept my chin level, and I said it one more time. "Quiet. Check again." That was when he put his hand on me. He took a fistful of the windbreaker at my collar, and he walked me backward, 3 steps, off the foot of the brow and onto the pier. Not gently. My heel caught a seam in the concrete, and I went down to one knee and came back up. The canvas bag slid off my shoulder and landed on the deck of the pier, and my cold coffee went off the bollard and spread out dark and steaming in the cold. "Wrong warship, lady," he said. The phone on the fantail came up higher. I heard a laugh, short and nervous, cut off fast. Somebody up there had the sense to be embarrassed, even if nobody yet had the sense to stop it. The lieutenant at the top of the brow had come down 2 steps and stopped, one hand on the rail, not sure what she was allowed to do. The petty officer with the log had gone very still. I did not swing. I did not shout for a supervisor. I did not tell him what he was about to find out. I stood there on the pier in the gray light with a torn collar and one wet knee, and I did the only thing 19 years had taught me to do in that exact moment. I watched. Because the boy was not the ship. The boy was one frightened kid with a rifle and a rank the size of a fingernail. The ship was the thing I had come to read. And the ship was watching too. I could feel it watching. A ship always knows before the people on it do. Tomorrow at 1000 hours, I was going to relieve the commanding officer of that ship. I was going to stand on that quarterdeck in service dress blues, read a set of orders out loud, turn to a man named Malcolm Frost, and say the words that make a ship yours. I relieve you, sir. And he would say the words back. I stand relieved. And 280 sailors would belong that morning to me. Today I was a woman in a windbreaker that a Marine had decided was nobody. I want to be careful here because it would be easy to make this a story about how angry I was. I was not angry. That surprised me a little, standing there on the wet concrete. I had expected, somewhere in the last 3 weeks of planning, that the ship would test me. Ships always test you. I had not expected the test to come at the foot of the brow, from a child, before I had even reported aboard. But there it was. And the thing about a test is that it only counts if you are honest about your own answer. So I stood still, and I felt the cold come through the wet knee of my slacks, and I made myself pay attention. I had commanded at sea in every way but the title for a long time. I had stood watches as officer of the deck when I was younger than that Marine. I had conned a destroyer through a strait so narrow you could read the road signs on the shore. I had been a chief engineer with my arms in a bilge at 3 a.m, tracing a fuel leak by feel because the light was bad. I had been a department head and then an executive officer, which is the job where you learn that command is mostly about deciding, over and over, what you are willing to walk past. I had walked past very little. That was the reputation anyway. I had never much cared what the reputation was. I cared what the ship was like on the mid-watch when nobody with a camera was around. You can dress a ship up for an admiral in an afternoon. What she is at 0300, when the passageways are empty and the watch is tired and nobody is coming to inspect anything, that is what she actually is. That is the only number I have ever trusted. Inside the canvas bag on the pier were 3 things. A set of service dress blues, folded the way you fold them so the coat does not crease across the back. On the left sleeve, near the cuff, 3 gold stripes. Above the pocket, the ribbons I had earned and a few I would have traded back if the trade had been on offer. And above those, the surface warfare pin, the ship and the waves, that says you are qualified to fight the thing you stand on. I had earned that pin on the frigate 3 piers down, at 24, after a board that lasted 2 hours and took a year off my life. A command at sea pin. Gold. You are not allowed to wear it until the moment the ship is yours. I had been carrying it in a small box for 3 weeks. I had taken it out twice, late, alone, and looked at it and put it back. I had not pinned it on. There is a kind of luck sailors keep, and pinning it early is bad luck, and I am not a superstitious woman except about the sea, where everyone is. And a letter I had not opened, in handwriting I would have known anywhere, from a woman who was supposed to be flying into Norfolk that afternoon, and now was not. I had carried heavier things up worse gangways than that one. I picked up the bag. I did not put it back on my shoulder. I held it, and I brushed the grit off the wet knee once with the flat of my hand, and I checked my watch. 3 hours and 55 minutes until the ship's morning quarters. I could wait. Waiting was a thing I knew how to do. The Navy teaches you very little as well as it teaches you to wait. So I waited, and I did the thing I had come down to the pier to do. I read the ship. Not the hull, the people. I watched the lieutenant at the top of the brow, the one who had come down 2 steps and stopped. I watched her want to do something and not know what she was allowed to do, and I filed that away. Because a young officer who wants to do the right thing and freezes is a different animal from one who does not want to do it at all, and the first kind you can build on. I watched the petty officer with the log go still and stay still. I watched the sailors on the fantail, the ones with the phone. I watched who laughed and who stopped laughing and how fast the stopping spread. You can learn most of what there is to know about a crew in 90 seconds on a cold pier if you are willing to stand there and be the reason they are all uncomfortable. I was willing. I had been willing for 19 years. None of them knew they were being graded. That is the only honest way to grade a ship. The moment they know, they stop being the ship and start being a performance. And a performance tells you nothing. So I stood there in my windbreaker and let them think I was nobody. Because nobody is exactly who you have to be to see a place plainly. The last time a sailor waved me off a quarterdeck, I was 23 years old, and it was my own ship. This was 2007. My first ship, a frigate, out of that same waterfront, 3 piers down from where I was standing now. I was 3 days into the fleet. I had a haircut that was too new and a set of coveralls that had never seen a working space and a qualification card that was blank on every line. I came down to the ship early one morning, the way you do when you are 23 and terrified and cannot sleep, to stand on the quarterdeck and try to feel like I belonged there. A second-class petty officer had the watch. He did not know me. There is no reason he should have. He looked at my blank coveralls and my scared face, and he said, not unkindly, "Ma'am, wardroom visits are at 10. You want the base tour, that's building such and such, back up the pier and to the left." He turned back to his log. It was not cruel. It was worse than cruel in a way, because it was casual. I did not even rate a second look. I stood there for a second with my face going hot, and then I did what a scared ensign does. I left. I walked back up the pier and I sat in my car and I put my forehead on the steering wheel and I wondered if I had made a terrible mistake with my whole life. That is where Master Chief Wanda Okoye found me. She was the command Master Chief of that frigate. She was 50-something then, built like a piling, with gray coming into her hair at the temples, and a voice she almost never had to raise, because she had learned a long time ago that the quiet ones make people lean in. She knocked on my car window with one knuckle. Once. I rolled it down and tried to look like an officer. She was not fooled. She was never fooled by anybody about anything, which is the whole job of a command master chief. "You going to remember this, ma'am?" she said. I said I was already trying to forget it. "No," she said. "Don't do that. Remember it. Remember exactly how it felt. Not who did it. The who does not matter. He is a good sailor having an ordinary morning, and by lunch he will not remember your face. What matters is how it felt to be waved off a place you had a right to stand by somebody who had decided he already knew everything worth knowing about you. Hold on to that feeling. You are going to need it later when you are the one at the top of the brow." I did not understand yet. She could tell. She leaned on the roof of the car and looked out at the water and gave me the whole thing, slow, the way you give a person something you need them to still have in 20 years. "Here's the only thing I'm going to teach you that you will still need when you are old," she said. "You want to know what an officer is really made of? You do not watch how they treat the admiral. Anybody can stand tall for the admiral. You watch how the lowest hand on the ship is allowed to treat a stranger. That is the officer. That is the ship. If a stranger can be shoved off your brow and nothing happens, then that is your ship, ma'am, whether you like it or not, and no inspection is going to tell you so. So when you get one," she tapped the roof of the car once, "you fix the ship. You do not crucify the sailor. The sailor is a symptom. You fix the ship." Then she straightened up and told me to wipe my face and come aboard the right way, up the brow, and request permission like an officer. And I did. And the same petty officer who had waved me off snapped to and logged me aboard and never knew he had taught me anything at all. I spent 19 years trying to be the officer she described, leaning on the roof of a Honda. I made chief engineer, and I made department head, and I made executive officer, and at every command I would stand on the quarterdeck on some cold morning and watch how a stranger got treated, and I would know, inside about 10 seconds, what kind of ship I was standing on. It never failed me, not once in 19 years. In 3 hours and 40 minutes, I was going to find out if I had built the thing she told me to build. And the strange grace of that morning, the thing I did not see until much later, was that the ship was going to show me the answer before I ever put on the uniform. The same cold, the same burn in the face, the same exact choice I had sat with in a car when I was 23. Fix the ship, not the sailor. Up on the bridge wing, 5 levels above the pier, a man in service khakis had been drinking coffee and watching the sun try to come up over the far side of the harbor. I did not know his name yet. I would, within the hour. Command Master Chief Owen Petrakis, 26 years in the Navy, the senior enlisted sailor on that ship, the man whose whole job is to know the things the wardroom does not. He had been up since 4. He had reviewed the plan of the day and the ceremony bill and the arrival schedule, because that is what a command master chief does the day before a change of command. He knew the incoming commanding officer was due aboard sometime that morning. He had seen the photograph that comes with the orders, the official one, the one where you're in your blues and you're not smiling. He looked down over the rail at the woman on the pier with the torn collar and the wet knee and the canvas bag at her feet, and he set his coffee mug down on the flat of the bridge wing, careful so it would not spill, and he went very still. He told me later he had known in half a second, not from the face exactly, from the way she was standing. He said, "Ma'am, nobody stands still like that after they get shoved unless they have been shoved before and learned it does not help to move. I saw how you were standing and I knew you were one of ours before I ever placed the photo." He did not shout. This is the part I love about how it happened, even now. He did not lean over the rail and bellow down at the Marine. A lesser man would have made a scene, and a scene would have been about him, about how fast he caught it, about how loud he could be. Petrakis picked up a sound-powered phone, the kind with the heavy handset and the growler you have to crank, and he called the one person who needed to hear it first. I could not hear what he said. I learned it later, from the messenger of the watch, a seaman who repeated it to half the ship by lunch and the other half by dinner. What Petrakis said into that phone was 6 words. "Captain, quarterdeck, right now, it's her." The captain of that ship was Commander Malcolm Frost, 44 years old, 2 years in command. A man who, by every account I had quietly collected in 3 weeks of asking careful questions of people who owed me honest answers, loved that ship in the plain, unshowy way that the good ones do. He did not talk about her much. He just never seemed to leave her. He was in his in-port cabin with the morning message board when the growler went off. He came out of the skin of the ship fast, down a ladder, through a passageway, out onto the quarterdeck at the top of the brow, still holding the message board in one hand because he had forgotten he was holding it. He looked down the brow. He saw the Marine. He saw me on the pier, one knee dark with wet, my bag at my feet, my identification still held up in the air between 2 fingers where the boy had refused to read it. And Malcolm Frost stopped dead. I watched his face do the arithmetic. I watched him see the torn collar and the coffee spreading on the pier and the phone on the fantail still filming. And I watched him understand, all at once, exactly what had happened on his quarterdeck the morning before he handed his ship to a stranger. It is a particular kind of pain, watching a good captain understand that his ship has done something he would never have allowed if he had been standing there. It is the pain of a man who knows a ship is only ever as good as the moment nobody is checking. He turned to the lieutenant junior grade at the top of the brow. His voice was low and even, and it carried the way a quiet voice carries when everyone within 30 feet has already stopped breathing. "Officer of the deck," he said, "render honors, right now." Here is the strange thing about the next 90 seconds. Everyone on that quarterdeck understood what was happening before the Marine did. He was the only person still living inside the morning he thought he was having. He had heard the captain come out. He had heard the tone. Some animal part of him knew the wind had changed and the temperature had dropped and something was very wrong. But he could not yet imagine a version of events in which the problem was him. That is the hardest thing in the world to imagine, at 21, at any age. So he did what frightened people do when the ground moves under them. He reached for the thing he had been sure of, and he doubled down on it. "Ma'am," he said to me, louder now, half for me and half for the officer coming down the brow behind him. "I already told you, you cannot just walk up on a United States Navy warship. I don't know how many times I have to say it." "You've told me twice," I said. I did not say it hard. I just said it so the number would be in the air so later nobody would have to guess. A chief petty officer had appeared at the foot of the brow, drawn up out of the ship by the noise the way chiefs are, and he read the situation faster than the Marine did, though not fast enough to have stopped it. He put himself between us, gentle, the way a good chief will, one hand out low, and he spoke to me in the voice you use for diffusing. "Ma'am, I apologize for all this. There's been a misunderstanding. Tell you what. Why don't you come back at 10 with everybody else? We'll get you squared away then, nice and easy, no trouble to anybody." It was a kindness. I want to give the chief that. He was trying to make a bad thing smaller. But it was also an exit, and I knew an exit when one was held open for me. "Walk off the pier. Go change into my blues in the visiting officers' quarters. Come back at 10:00 with the folding chairs and the guests and the band, and let the ceremony paper over the whole ugly morning like it had never happened. Nobody would have to write anything. Nobody would have to be relieved. The Marine would never know how close he had come. And I would take command of a ship that had shoved its next captain off the brow and filmed it. And I would carry that quietly the way you carry things, and I would tell myself it did not matter, and every morning for 2 years I would walk up that brow and know that it did. I stood there on the wet concrete, and I felt how much I wanted to take that door. That is the part nobody tells you about being the wronged one. The easiest thing in the world, when you have finally got the power, is to be gracious in a way that costs you nothing and fixes nothing. To smile and wave it off and let everyone feel better and change not one single thing about the ship. I could have done that. It would have looked like class. People would have told the story for years about how the new captain took it on the chin and never said a word. And it would have been a lie, because taking it on the chin and changing nothing is not grace. It is just the smaller version of me, the one who left the quarterdeck at 23 and put her head on the steering wheel and wondered if she belonged. Master Chief Okoye did not teach me to take the quiet door. "Thank you, Chief," I said. "I know you're trying to help, and I mean that, but I'll wait right here." And I stayed on the pier, still and plain, with my torn collar and my bag at my feet, and I let the ship come down the brow to me. The old anger, the 23-year-old with her head on the wheel, wanted a name and a stripe. It wanted the Marine's name written down in block letters. It wanted him standing at attention in front of the base commander by noon. It wanted, if I am honest, and there is no point in this being anything but honest, to watch his face in the exact second he understood what he had done. I knew that anger well. I had spent a career keeping it on a short leash because an officer who runs on that fuel burns the ship down eventually, and everyone aboard can smell it on you, the way you can smell an overheated bearing before it seizes. The crew always knows which captains are feeding themselves on being right. They batten down and they wait you out and they give you the minimum, and they are correct too. Okoye's rule wanted something different. It did not want the boy destroyed. It wanted a ship where the next stranger who walked up that pier would be met with something better than a hand on the collar. A lost spouse who drove through the night, a new seaman on his first day, a civilian contractor with a hard hat and a work order, a chaplain, an old veteran come to see a ship one last time before his knees or his heart would not let him make the trip again. Any of them. All of them. Those two things are not the same thing. It took me years to learn they are not the same. You can ruin one Marine and change nothing. Or you can let the one Marine live and change the whole ship. Only one of those is command. The other one just feels like command for about a day. I made the decision on the pier, before the honors, before Frost even reached me. Whatever happened when this ship became mine, the lesson was not going to be a 21-year-old's public execution. The lesson was going to be the standard, and the standard had to be bigger than the boy. Or it was not a standard, it was just a grudge in a good uniform. The whole point of a standard is that it outlives the person who broke it. It is the thing you leave behind that keeps working after you are gone. Commander Frost came down the brow himself. He did not send anyone. He came down the brow and he stood in front of me on the pier and he looked at the collar and the knee and the spilled coffee. And I saw a real anger move under his composure. Not the ugly kind, the clean kind, the kind that is aimed at a failure and not at a person. "Commander Barrow," he said, "I am sorry, this is not my ship. I mean, it is my ship for 18 more hours, and it is not supposed to be this. It is not this. Let me walk you aboard." I shook my head. Not unkind, but I did not take his arm. "Not like this, Captain," I said. "Not up the side quiet, with everybody pretending nothing happened. Pipe me aboard. Do it right. Let the ship hear it. That is how I want to come aboard her the first time." He looked at me for a second, and then something eased in his face, because he understood what I was doing. And more than that, he approved of it. The way one captain approves of another when they recognize the same thing living in the other person. "Aye, ma'am," he said, and he turned and went back up the brow to make it happen. On a warship, you are announced by the name of the thing you command. A visitor gets nothing. A junior officer gets nothing. A senior officer coming aboard on official business gets his rank and his organization passed over the general announcing system, the one MC, so the ship knows a body of some importance has crossed the brow and can act accordingly. But there is one person, and only one, on any ship in the fleet, who is piped aboard by the name of the ship itself, the captain. When the commanding officer crosses that brow, the word that goes out over the 1MC to every space on the ship, every mess and every berthing and every engine room, is the ship's own name, and the single word, arriving. Because on that deck, in that moment, the officer and the ship are the same thing. There is no daylight between them. That is what command means, and it is the whole of what it means. The boy at the brow had turned that away twice. The lieutenant junior grade, the officer of the deck, had a boatswain's pipe. Every quarterdeck has one, on a lanyard, kept bright. She raised it to her lips, and her hand was not quite steady. I could see the pipe tremble, and she blew the call. It is a thin, high, old sound, the same sound sailors have made on that same small silver instrument for 300 years and more. And it does something to the back of your neck even when you are standing there expecting it, even when you have heard it 10,000 times. Then she keyed the 1MC, and her voice went out to every compartment on that ship at once. Halstead, arriving. I heard it come back off the water and off the hull and off the metal face of the warehouses across the pier. Halstead, arriving. The name of the ship. My ship. Passed for me at the foot of a brow I had just been thrown off of, in a torn windbreaker on one wet knee, with a marine's fingerprints still on my collar. I watched it move through them like cold water poured straight down the back of a shirt. Not fear. Understanding. The petty officer with the log straightened without being told came up an inch taller. The sailors on the fantail put their phones down, all of them at once, as if the same invisible hand had reached out and lowered every arm in the same second. Whatever was on those phones, it was over now. The lieutenant at the top of the brow came to attention so sharp I heard her heels come together across 30 feet of steel and open air, and the Marine. I will tell you exactly what happened on the Marine's face, because I was watching it on purpose. And because it is the only revenge I took that morning, and the only one I ever wanted. His face did not fall. That would have been ordinary. It emptied. Everything he had been so certain of for the last 4 minutes drained straight out of it and left behind a 21-year-old kid who had just understood, all at once, that the woman he had grabbed by the collar and thrown off the brow was the one whose name the entire ship had just been ordered to stand up for. He looked at me. He looked at the quarterdeck full of sailors at attention. He looked back at me, and he went the color of the water between the pier and the hull, that flat winter gray, all the blood gone out of him. I picked up my bag. I did not look at him again. Looking at him again would have been for me, not for the ship, and this was not going to be about me. I walked to the foot of the brow and I stopped, and I turned aft toward the small national ensign flying at the ship's stern, and I brought my hand up in a salute and held it. Then I turned to the lieutenant junior grade at the top of the brow and I held the salute to her too, because that is the order of it, the flag first and then the ship's representative, and I said the words you say. The words a scared ensign had not been given the chance to say on that same waterfront 19 years before. I request permission to come aboard. The lieutenant's voice only shook a little. She had earned the right for it to shake after the morning she had just had, and she mastered it. Permission granted, ma'am. And I walked up the brow, one hand light on the rail, and I stepped onto the deck that was going to be mine. And the ship took the weight of me, the way steel takes a load, without a sound and without a complaint, as if she had been waiting for it. The quarterdeck was very quiet. Commander Frost was there, and Command Master Chief Petrakis had come down from the bridge, moving without hurry, and the lieutenant junior grade, whose name I now knew was Anand, stood her watch with her chin up and her eyes bright and wet, furious at herself for the 2 seconds she had hesitated on the brow. I made a note to talk to her later, alone, and tell her that the 2 seconds were not the thing to remember. The pipe was the thing to remember. She had done it shaking, and she had done it right. The chief who had offered me the quiet door stood off to the side with his hands behind his back, learning something. And back on the pier, alone at the foot of the brow, the Marine stood at a position of attention so rigid it looked painful, already grieving a career he was certain had just ended in front of 200 witnesses and a phone. Frost stepped close to me and spoke low, so it stayed between the two of us. Ma'am, say the word, and I will have that Marine relieved of his post, off my pier, and written up before your coffee would have gotten cold. That was an assault. On you, on my quarterdeck, on my watch, the morning before I hand you the ship. I have never been more embarrassed by anything in 2 years of command. I will burn it down to the deck plates if you want it burned. I understood the offer. It was a real one, not a formality. Malcolm Frost had 18 hours left in command of that ship, and he was prepared to spend them destroying one Marine to make it right with me, and part of him needed to, because it had happened on his watch, and it was going to gnaw at him for years no matter what I said. I have carried things like that myself. They do not get lighter, you just get stronger arms. Petrakis said nothing. He stood a little apart, and he watched me. I understood that too. The Command Master Chief was not watching to see whether I would be angry. He already knew I had every right to be. He was watching to see what I would do with the anger, because whatever I did with it in the next 30 seconds was going to tell him. And through him, it was going to tell the whole ship by nightfall. Exactly what kind of captain had just been piped aboard. He was reading me the way I had come down to the pier to read the ship. Fair is fair. The Marine had gone from certain to terrified without ever, in the whole encounter, being right for even 1 second. He had been wrong about who I was, and wrong about what he was allowed to do, and now he was wrong about this too, about what was coming. And I found that I did not want to leave him wrong about the last thing. Being wrong about the last thing would have taught him nothing, except that the world is a trapdoor. He already suspected that. Most 21-year-olds do. I did not need to prove it to him. I thought about Okoye while I stood there deciding. I always did, at the turns. I thought about how easy it would have been for her, that morning in the parking lot, to march down to my frigate and find the petty officer who had waved me off and take a stripe off him for embarrassing an officer. She had every right to. She was the Command Master Chief. One word and that sailor's month would have gone dark. She did not spend the word. She spent her morning in a cold car, teaching a scared ensign a rule instead, because she understood the arithmetic that most people never learn. You get exactly one of those two things. You can have the satisfaction, or you can have the change. You almost never get both, and if you are the kind of person who reaches for the satisfaction, you will spend a whole career wondering why nothing around you ever gets better while your record fills up with people you were technically right about. She chose the change. Every time for 30 years, she chose the change over the satisfaction, and it is why 100 officers she never mentioned by name are better at the job than they would have been, and it is why I was standing on that quarterdeck at all. The least I could do with her letter unopened in my bag and her lungs failing in a house by the water was choose the same thing she chose, in almost the same spot, one more time. It was not even a hard call once I put her face on it. It was the easiest call I made all morning. Nobody's getting relieved on my first morning aboard this ship, I said. Captain, I appreciate the offer more than I can tell you, and I mean that, and I will not forget it. Stand down, Command Master Chief. I turned to Petrakis. Bring that Marine up here, not to mast, not to the base commander, to me, and get somebody to take a look after Lieutenant Anand. She piped a beautiful call with her hands shaking, and she should hear from a chief that shaking through it is not the same as failing. It is the opposite. Petrakis looked at me for one more second. Then something in his face settled, the way a ship settles onto her lines when the tide finally comes right and the strain goes out of the mooring, and he said, "Aye, ma'am." And I heard, under the two flat words, the thing I had spent 3 weeks unable to learn about that ship from any distance and any amount of careful asking. The ship was going to be all right, and so I understood, was I. They put me in the captain's in-port cabin to wait while they sorted out the morning, and Frost, with a grace I have not forgotten, left me alone in it. It is a small space. A rack that folds, a desk bolted to the bulkhead, a couple of chairs, a picture of somebody's family, a coffee mug ringed brown from 1,000 mornings. In 18 hours it would be mine, and I would bring my own mug and make my own rings on the desk, and someday, sooner than I could imagine that morning, I would pack it all up and leave it clean for the next one. That is how it works. You are a tenant in every space you ever command. The ship was there before you, and she will be there long after, and all you ever get is a turn at the wheel. The good captains know it going in. The bad ones find out on the way out. I sat down at the desk that was not yet mine, and I took the letter out of the canvas bag. I had known the handwriting from across the room before I could read a word of it. Wanda Okoye. Master Chief retired 12 years now off active duty, out on the eastern shore in a house with a porch that looked at the same water she had given her whole life to. She had been going to fly into Norfolk that afternoon. She had been going to sit in the second row at my change of command in a good dress, with her old command coin zipped into the pocket of her purse, and watch a scared ensign she had found in a Honda take command of a United States destroyer. 3 weeks before, she had called me and told me in the same flat voice she had used to teach me everything I knew that she was not going to be able to make the flight, that the thing in her lungs had a name now and a schedule of its own, and the schedule did not have Norfolk on it. She had told me not to make it a thing. She had told me, in as many words, to keep my mind on the ship and off of her, because the ship was going to need all of me and she did not need any. I opened the letter. It was short. It was in her hand, which had gone a little shaky, and I could see in the pen strokes where she had pressed down hard to keep the letters from wandering, the way you press down hard on a wet knee to stop it from bleeding through. She had written the rule out one more time, the whole thing, the way she had said it leaning on the roof of my car. And at the bottom, under it, in 3 more lines, she had written the rest. Fix the ship, not the sailor. You already know this, which is the whole reason they gave you the ship and not somebody louder. Now go be the quarterdeck a scared kid can walk up to without his hands shaking. I taught you on a pier because a pier was where I found you. Teach the next one better than I taught you. That is the only thanks I want. I sat with that for a while. The ship hummed around me, that low, steady note a ship makes that you stop hearing after a week and never really hear again until you are ashore and cannot sleep for the silence. Then I let myself think, for the first time in the noise of that whole morning, about the thing under all of it. The thing that command is actually made of, and that they do not pipe aboard, and that nobody puts in the program. I had not kept everyone. There had been a night in the winter of 2018, in the Gulf, a merchant ship in distress and a heavy following sea, and a tow that had to be rigged in the dark with green water coming over the deck. We got the ship. We got very nearly all of her people. I had a young sailor of my own, a boatswain's mate, 19 years old, strong as a cable, laughing about the cold an hour before. And the sea took him off the fantail between one wave and the next while he was doing exactly what I had told him to do. We did everything there is to do. We turned, we searched, we put swimmers in water no swimmer should be in. It was not enough. The sea does not care what is enough. I wrote the letter to his mother in that same kind of handwriting, pressing down hard to keep it steady. Okoye was retired by then, but she drove up and sat with me the night I wrote it. She did not say anything wise. She did not have anything wise. She just sat there in the chair across the room so that I would not have to be alone with it, and that turned out to be the wisest thing there was. His name was Diaz. I will not pretend to you that I have to work to remember it. I do not. It is right there, all the time, the way your own address is. He wanted to be a diver. He had the paperwork half filled out. He kept a picture of his mother and his little sister taped inside his rack, and after, I was the one who took it down and mailed it home. And I wrapped it in a shirt so the glass would not break, and it is a strange thing to be a full commander at sea, responsible for a machine that can level a city, and to stand in a 19-year-old's berthing, folding a shirt around a photograph so carefully, because it is the last gentle thing anyone will ever do with his name aboard your ship. His mother wrote me back. That is the part I did not expect. Months later, a short letter, careful handwriting, no anger in it, which was worse than anger would have been. She thanked me for turning the ship around and searching, because someone aboard had told her we had, that we had not just written him off to the sea and steamed on. She said, knowing that we tried, let her sleep again. I have that letter too. I keep it in the same place I keep the rule. That is the part they do not announce over the 1MC. You get piped aboard by the name of the ship, and the name of the ship is also, if you have been at this long enough, the names of everyone you did not bring home. You carry both up the same brow in the same hand. Command is not a trophy. I have never once been able to make it feel like a trophy. It is a debt you agree to keep paying in installments for the rest of your life. And the interest is the ones you lost. I folded the letter along its old creases, and I put it in the inside pocket of the windbreaker, over the place where the ribbons would sit tomorrow, and I stood up. There was work to do. There is always work to do. That is the mercy of a ship. She never lets you sit too long with the thing under everything. She always needs something. I stood up and went to find out what she needed. They brought the Marine to me an hour later, on the quarterdeck in front of the watch. I had asked for that on purpose, not to shame him, The lesson had to be as public as the wrong had been, or it was not a lesson at all. It was just a private mercy that the ship would never see and never learn a thing from. A quarterdeck learns the way a person learns. Out loud, in front of everybody, once, hard enough to stick. His name was Tanner. Lance Corporal Tanner. He stood in front of me at a rigid attention with his jaw set and his eyes fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder, out at the harbor, waiting for the axe to come down. His hands were steady, but I could see what it cost him to keep them that way. I let him stand there for a second, not to punish him, but because I wanted the whole watch to see me think before I opened my mouth. A captain who does not visibly think is a captain, the crew learns to fear and stops telling the truth to. Then I told him to stand at ease, and he could not quite manage it, so he stood at something halfway between at ease and attention, which is honestly where most of us live, most of the time. Lance Corporal, I said, this morning you had one job on that pier: keep unauthorized people off a United States Navy warship. That is a real job. It matters. Ships have been hurt by people who walked up a brow that nobody was guarding. And this morning you did that job. You saw somebody you did not recognize try to come aboard, and you stopped her. I want you to hear this from me in front of these witnesses before I say anything else. That part, you got right. He had not been expecting that. Whatever speech he had braced himself for, it did not start there. His eyes came off the point over my shoulder and found my face, careful, the way you look at a thing that might still bite. You got two things wrong, I said. The first one is small. You got wrong who I was. That happens. That is going to happen to you your entire life. You are going to be dead certain about a person, and you are going to be wrong, and the card you refused to read this morning is the thing that would have saved you every single time. Read the card, Lance Corporal, every time, no matter how sure you are. Especially when you are sure. But that is the small thing, and I am not going to spend much breath on it, because if that were the whole of it, I would send you back to your post and forget your name by dinner. Ma'am, he said. It was not quite a word. It was just the sound a scared kid makes to prove he is still standing there and still listening. The big thing you got wrong is your hands, I said. You put your hands on a person who was standing still, who was showing you her identification, who was keeping her voice down and doing you no harm and giving you no reason. You did that because you had decided she was nobody, and somewhere along the line you had picked up the idea that a nobody can be handled however you like because there is no cost. That is the thing I need you to carry off this pier, and I need you to carry it for the rest of your life. So listen to me. It is not that she turned out to be the captain. Forget that. Put it down. That part is luck, and luck is not a lesson. Luck is just the thing that decides how expensive your mistake is going to be. The lesson is that you do not get to put your hands on the nobody, because there is no nobody. There has never once been a nobody walk up a brow in the history of the fleet. I let that sit. The watch was very quiet. Even the gulls seemed to have knocked it off. There is a spouse who drove 4 hours through the night to surprise a sailor coming home, I said. There is a new seaman on his first morning in the fleet, too scared to say his own name out loud, standing right where you're standing now, inside about a year. There's somebody's grandfather who served on a ship a lot like this one, a long time ago, and drove down with his oxygen in the back seat because he wanted to see it one more time before he could not make the trip. Every one of them is going to walk up a brow that you are standing on. Not one of them is nobody. And how you treat them in the moment when you are absolutely certain they do not matter, that is the whole measure of you. Not how you treat me. Any fool can be polite to the captain. How you treat the nobody. Do you understand what I am telling you? Yes, ma'am, he said. And this time it was a whole sentence, clear, and he meant it all the way down, and I watched it land in him in the place where things land when you are 21, and somebody hands you the truth instead of handing you your career on a plate cut into pieces. Good, I said. Here's what happens now. You are not being relieved. You are not being taken to mast. You are not being written up by me or by anyone on this ship. You are going to go back down that brow, and you are going to finish your watch, and you are going to stand it better than anybody has ever stood a watch on this pier. And someday, when you have got a lance corporal of your own who thinks a nobody can be handled however he likes, You are going to teach him this before he learns it the hard way on somebody who is not able to forgive it. That is your punishment, Lance Corporal Tanner. You are going to carry the rule, and you are going to pass it on. Dismissed. He came to attention, and he saluted me, and it was not the loose salute of a kid going through the motions to get away from a bad moment. And it was the other kind, the kind that costs something. I returned it, and he turned and went back down the brow to finish his watch, and I stood there and watched him stand it for a minute or two. He stood it like a different Marine than the one who had grabbed my collar an hour before. Feet planted, eyes moving, present. That was enough. That was, in fact, everything I had wanted off that pier. And I had gotten it without breaking a single person to get it. The next morning at 10:00 hours, I put on the service dress blues and I pinned on the command at sea pin, gold. Finally, after 3 weeks in a box, and I stood on that quarterdeck under a clean blue sky with the folding chairs full and the guests in their good clothes and the ship's company in ranks. I read my orders out loud, every word, the way you do. I turned to Malcolm Frost and I said, I relieve you, sir. And he said, I stand relieved, and I watched 2 years come off his shoulders in the space of 4 words, the way it always does, the good ones and the bad ones both. And then it was my ship. 280 sailors, all of it, mine. When it came time for my remarks, I did not tell the story of the brow. I want you to know that. I named no one. I did not point. I did not so much as glance toward the 3rd rank. I stood up in front of my new crew, and I told them exactly one thing about the kind of quarterdeck we were going to run together. I told them that on this ship, the measure of a sailor was never going to be how they treated the admiral, because anybody alive can stand tall for the admiral. The measure of a sailor on the Halstead was going to be how the lowest hand aboard treated a stranger who walked up our pier with no rank and no power and no claim on us at all, except the only claim that has ever mattered, which is that it is right. The story I did not tell was standing in the 3rd rank in a fresh pressed set of camis, at attention, listening to every word. He knew I was talking about him. Nobody else on that pier knew, and nobody else ever needed to, and nobody ever found out from me. And somewhere out on the eastern shore, on a porch by the gray water, I let myself hope that an old Master Chief with a schedule she did not choose could somehow feel that a rule she had taught a scared ensign through the window of a Honda had just been read out loud, in her own words, to 280 sailors, and had become, in that hour, the standard of a United States warship. Petrakis found me afterward, in the small quiet that comes after the guests leave and the folding chairs get stacked and a ship remembers she has a day to run. He did not say much. Command Master Chiefs rarely do to captains in the first week, he said. That was the right call on the pier, ma'am. The whole ship watched what you did with it. I want you to know they all know, and none of them will say so, and that is exactly how it should be. Then he told me the part I had not seen, that the sailor with the phone on the fantail had come to him that first afternoon, on his own, and deleted the video in front of him, and asked him to pass to the captain that he was sorry he had filmed instead of saying something. I told Petrakis to tell that sailor I did not need the apology, but that the next time he was on that fantail and something was wrong, I wanted his voice, not his camera. He said he would pass it exactly like that. He did. I kept an eye on Tanner the rest of that deployment cycle, quietly, the way you keep an eye on a thing you have decided to invest in. I did not baby him, and I did not haunt him. I just watched, the way I watch everything. And a few months later I heard, through the chief's mess, which hears everything, that a lost spouse had come down the pier looking for a sailor, confused, close to tears, on the wrong day, and that a young Marine at the head of the brow had come down off his post and carried her bag, and walked her to the quarterdeck himself, and gotten her squared away, gentle as anything, and never once made her feel like she was nobody. Nobody told him to. Nobody was grading him. That is the only kind of proof that counts. The ensign ran up to the peak of the mast, snapping in the wind. The ship was mine. And the brow, from that morning forward, was a different place to walk up.
If you have ever been waved off a place you had every right to stand, by somebody with a little authority and a bad morning, I want to leave you with the one thing that Cold Pier taught me. The thing I had to learn twice, 19 years apart, in almost the same spot. You do not owe them a scene. The scene is exactly what they will expect, and it is the thing that lets everyone else off the hook, because a scene makes the story about your temper instead of about their failure. Keep your voice level. Show them the card. Say check again and mean it, and let it be enough that you said it. And if they still cannot see you, then wait.
because the truth about who you are does not need your help to arrive. It does not need you to shout it or prove it or force it. It arrives on its own, in its own time, sometimes in a name called out over the water for the whole world to hear. And here is the other half. The half that matters more, and the half that is harder, and the half that is really the reason I told you any of this. It is for the day when you are the one standing at the top of the brow, with the authority and the bad morning and the certainty. There is no nobody. There is no stranger who does not count. There is no person so small that how you treat them does not measure you all the way to the bottom. The whole of you is in how you treat the one you are sure does not matter. So when the deck is finally yours, and it will be in some form, it always comes to everyone eventually. Remember how the cold felt on the pier when you were the one being shoved. And build something that spares the next stranger it. Fix the ship, not the sailor.